So we've talked about annotating the function parameters. We also can annotate the value returned by a function. What type should this function return? And the way that we do that is with the same old syntax. We add a colon and then the type, but we do it after the parameter list. So this function right here, add nums, is an arrow function, which is fine. This will work with all the different ways of declaring a function. And we've got the parameters. X has to be a number, y is a number. And then after that, we see that the function returns a number. Now, we actually don't have to do this. Just like with variables, TypeScript can infer the return type of a function. So if we actually take a look at, for example, this square function we wrote earlier, it expects a single number as its argument, right, num, and then it returns num times num. And TypeScript is smart. It knows num is a number, and it's returning a number times a number, and that means the return value has to be a number. So if I actually hover over square, you'll see it's telling me that right there. It's returning a number. So technically, I don't have to put this here. We haven't been putting it there, and TypeScript has been figuring it out just fine. Just as another example here, look at our greet function. Greet, it tells me it returns a string. So I didn't put it in there. I don't have to put that in there, but I can. And the reason that you want to do that, or at least I like to do it, is that it's obvious, first of all, what the function returns, and it's harder for you to screw it up. For example, I could have written a greet function or a square function. Let's take the square function. And let's say that I don't explicitly annotate the return type. Maybe I forget the return keyword. So what does TypeScript now infer about this function? It doesn't give me an error if I call square, give it a number, no problem. But if you look at what it says when I hover over square, it says it returns void. We're about to talk about the void keyword, but it just means nothing. It doesn't return anything at all. There's no return value. So that is very different from what I actually intended. I just messed up and TypeScript didn't catch it because why would it? It's inferring based off of what I'm typing in here, what I'm returning. And it inferred that I'm returning nothing. But if I instead said this function is supposed to return a number, this stands as a reminder to me, but also to TypeScript. Hey, this is supposed to return a number, and now it complains. It says, well, you didn't return a number, so I need to make sure I return that number in here. So kind of a contrived example, but I like to put these annotations in, the return value annotations, mostly for my own sanity and for other people who are looking at this function. It's very obvious what it returns. And this is a small one, but you can have, complicated functions absolutely that have lots of lines, and the return statement might be buried in there somewhere. It's nice and obvious if you put right at the top what the function expects as parameters and what it returns. Now, some functions are going to return more than one type potentially, and that's something we haven't yet discussed, just like we haven't discussed a variable that could have more than one type, a string or a number. But I'll just show an example of this real quick. If I write a function called, mystery, or how about just rando, and it expects a number, we'll call it num. And I'm just going to check, basically flip a coin. If math.random is less than 0.5, I will return, how about the string version? So toString. Whoops, I can't type. Return num.toString. So I'm returning, whatever this number is as a string. Otherwise, I'm going to return the number itself. So we've got a function that could return a string, right? If I passed in 5 or 7 and math.random was less than 0.5, then I'm returning the string 7. But if that's not the case, I'm returning the number 7. All of this is to say that there's not just one value or one type that could be returned, and TypeScript is smart enough to figure that out. Take a look here. It says string or number. So we're going to talk about these. It's called a union type shortly, but it's pretty straightforward. We're basically saying, or TypeScript is saying, this function returns a string or a number, one or the other. And that's pretty much all there is for return types. I should just show quickly, this works with all types of functions, not just a named function like you see here. It also works with, an arrow function. Let's just say I have const add. Do I have an add already? Nope. So add will be an arrow function, just like that. And it's going to expect x, which is a number. Y is also a number. And then if I want it to return a number, I add it after that parameter list, add that annotation there. And then in here, return x plus y. So that's an arrow function stored in a variable. This is a named function. It works with anonymous functions. It doesn't matter. We just put the annotation for that return type after the parameter list. And yes, it's kind of a stylistic choice if you want to include those. I like to include them, and I'm going to include them throughout the course because it just makes things really obvious, especially if you're watching this or looking at the code. Immediately this function returns a number or this function returns a string. Granted, you could tell pretty quickly looking at them, but that's beyond the point. These are just really simple functions because I'm teaching stuff. In the real world, they're probably going to be a little more complicated.